How's that for a slice of fried gold?
You think this is a fucking costume? This is a way of life.
I'll be back.
There's a flesh wound. I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Take your sticking paws off me, you damn dirty ape!
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
I guess everyone's entitled to one good scare, huh?
We're bantering. I said I was ready to go.
We actually had a decent conversation before we started about like comics and stuff, and
yeah, it's on tape. Nobody will believe it. Nobody will believe it ever happened.
Yeah, just lost the time.
Well, hello, and welcome to Cinema Shock, not Comic Shock, the show that digs deep into your stories behind your favorite cult genre movies. I'm one of your hosts, Gary Horde.
I'm another one of them, Justin Bishop.
And I'm Todd A. Davis, still on this damn lawnmower. But at least I have my two favorite wieners to journey with.
Oh, thank you. Wait,
I like it.
Thank you for joining us as we continue through this new series, David Lynch.
Not new.
Between Two Worlds.
It's not new.
Well, I mean, we're
three episodes. We're halfway through.
with this movie, this feels like a new series.
Well, we're the third out of 5 episodes, or third out of 5 movies of this series.
Todd, I don't want you to fret. We'll get the old David Lynch back. Don't you worry.
Oh, God!
Don't you worry, buddy. Don't you worry. Did you guys laugh when Richard Farnsworth said wieners? Because I giggled.
Yeah.
It's a funny word.
What do you got there?
Wieners.
I'd laugh, just as a side note also. Why does Norm Macdonald seem to love... I mean, I get why he loves this movie so much, but I found like multiple interviews where
he was just waxing poetic about
he's just talking about the straight story. and even they would talk about impersonations, and he's just like, I don't really do an impersonation. Well, I do Richard Farnsworth in the straight story. And then he tells the story about like killing somebody as a sniper, and
wow,
and that's it. I mean, he just does that pretty straightforward, and it's
not even fun. It's not even a joke. He's just doing a scene from a movie that he likes.
Yeah.
Well, when we last left David Lynch, he had assembled his cast: Richard Farnsworth, Sissy Spacek, and Harry Dean Stanton, and was preparing to make a film unlike anything that he'd made before. So this week, we will follow the straight story into production and beyond, from the cornfields of Iowa to the Cannes Film Festival, and eventually to Walt Disney Pictures.
Oh, boy. Gosh.
Thank you, Gary.
Nice.
Oh, wow. We're okay. Well, before we get rolling, we got to thank our Cinema Shock Plus subscribers, including our newest member, Kyle Davis, KDurden, who joined us at the projectionist tier. Gave him a shout out on the last episode too. You deserve 2 shout outs. Kyle, you're not even going to hear this because you're a Cinema Shock Plus subscriber and you already got the whole episode last week, the extended version. So why am I even talking to you right now? Honestly. But we want to show our appreciation to Kyle and all of our Cinema Shock Plus subscribers. They all get early access, extended cuts, all the other weird bonus stuff that we can't fit into the regular episodes. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, head over to cinemashock.net/plus to join the club and help support the show.
For what it's worth, Kyle did tell me ahead of time that he was signing up for Cinema Shock Plus specifically because he wanted access to Fire Shock with Me, our Twin Peaks watch-along episodes. So cool. You can check that out. So he is he's sucked into the David Lynch spiral, and he wants to be a part of it. All of it.
I love it. He's hooked. He's hooked like all of us are. Well, I mean, not all of us.
I was going to say. Oh, cowboy.
All right, let's get into it. So once the ball started rolling on the straight story, things, ironically, started moving pretty fast.
Nice one.
Thank you. The film was pitched to the French production company Studio Canal in the summer of 1998. And by mid-September, cameras were already rolling on a modest $7 million budget.
We're talking about lightning fast production, especially by Lynch standards, because considering the complex logistics of moving like 100+ people across states, this little bit of money, it kind of feels like it proves that if you can eliminate demons, prostitutes, and dream sequences and stuff, that even David Lynch can make a movie for cheap.
Yeah, I mean, most of his movies are fairly cheap, minus like Dune. but they're not all this cheap. What was Lost Highway? I can't remember. It was like 12 million or something like that.
Yeah,
So
I don't
not-
think any of his have been terrible. Like,
yeah.
Well, I think Mary Sweeney and Roach, was it Roach?
Jay Roach,
Right.
or not Jay Roach. That's the guy who directed Austin Powers. John
Oh.
Roach. What if it had been Jay Roach?
Hey.
movie.
Vern Troyer shows up as the man from another place.
We would have at least gotten a scene of Alvin Straight trying to get his lawnmower out of a hallway or something.
Yeah, just like trying to do the 3-point turn and
But I mean, I think we said that they had kind of initially had this idea of it being like a pretty small, like independent production. Yes.
yeah, which it was. I mean, it was produced by Studio Canal, which is not a major studio by any means.
Gotcha.
And behind the scenes, David Lynch reunited with several of his longtime collaborators, among them cinematographer Freddie Francis, who had first worked with him nearly 2 decades earlier on The Elephant Man.
I felt like going back to Freddie Francis is cool because it feels like this whole thing feels like a huge family affair with the making of this movie. Like just how tight everybody seems to be. That going from Mary Sweeney and Roach's like connection even from childhood to just writing the script, and David Lynch, her partner, gets involved and is directing the movie. Then it's like I don't know. I mean, I guess Farnsworth would be a little outside of this, but
Harry
you know,
Dean
just
and Sissy Spacek.
Harry Dean, Sissy Spacek. Yeah, it just feels like there's all just like this tight knit group of crew involved here.
Yeah, and the choice of Freddie Francis as the cinematographer wasn't just Lynch being nostalgic, it was instinctive. So, because like The Elephant Man, this was another story based on real events, stripped from Lynch's usual surrealism, but charged with emotion. And Lynch also knew that Francis, who was 81 years old at the time, would personally connect with the story and with Alvin Straight as a character. So that summer, Lynch called Francis and convinced him to essentially come out of retirement. I mean, Francis was basically retired at this point. And Francis agreed almost immediately, but only on one condition, that the shoot would be limited to 10-hour days, because at his age, he was not about to return to the 16 and 17-hour marathons that had become standard on most productions.
Good for him.
Yeah, it was an easy partnership. Francis later said in an interview, there's a fantastic interview with him and the American cinematographers there in their magazine, but he said that after 5 minutes of conversation, he and Lynch were completely in sync on what they wanted the movie to look like. And for the rest of the movie, he said, we'd never discuss the photography.
Real quick little recap. You know, Elephant Man was in 1980. Dune was in 84. The very next year, Francis was the uncredited, for some reason, cinematographer on Return to Oz, which was directed by Walter Murch and starring Fairuza Balk, and as Aunt M, Piper Laurie from Twin Peaks.
No shit. Also, Brian Henson's in there. So if you want to connect this to another one of our series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After that, he was the DP on Edward Wick's Civil War epic Glory in 1989, starring Matthew Broderick, Denzel, Carrie Ulls, Morgan Freeman, and the infamous Cape Fear in 1991, one of the many collaborations between De Niro and Scorsese, also starring Nick Nolte, Jessica Lange, and the famed nudist Juliette Lewis. Francis won an Oscar and a BAFTA for those films, respectively. He also shot a feature-length interview with legendary actor Peter Cushing, titled Peter Cushing, A One-Way Ticket to Hollywood. Now, Cushing, of course, played Grand Moff Tarkin in Star Wars, but amidst all of his Hammer horror performances, Cushing starred as Doctor Who, not the Doctor, in 2 Doctor Who movies. It's Doctor Who and the Daleks in 1965, and again the following year, Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD.
Did Freddie Francis have anything to do with those Doctor Who movies?
He did not, but I just wanted to have like a little Star Wars, the trifecta. I'm trying to work in the trifecta.
Sure, okay, Todd.
I was about to be like, so anyway, going back to the straight story.
Francis and Cushing's working relationship actually spans 9 films from 1957.
Why are we talking about Peter Cushing right now?
I'm getting back into it. From 1957 to 1975, one of which is a Hammer horror, The Evil of Frankenstein, from 1964.
So the people that don't know, Peter Cushing was originally going to be playing Alvin Straight, or at least for purposes
he'd have done a great job
of this podcast. So any of that makes any goddamn sense.
Okay, I fell down a Peter Cushing hole. Okay.
Yeah, many have fallen down a Peter Cushing hole.
Hey.
I was going to bring up that it just having an octogenarian cinematographer just seems kind of poetic in a sense too, and that he's a machine and just still going after all this time. You know, David Lynch is so relaxed anywhere. You always, it's famously like his sets are usually relaxed, it seems like. So it seems like it was probably easy for him to honor the 10-hour day thing. And supposedly, once that was locked in and agreed to, Francis was nonstop. Lynch said in some interviews that he called him a live wire, that little devil. He said that there were younger guys falling before Freddie was. He also said that he wanted him on set, especially because he felt that he would create a camaraderie on set with Farnsworth to add to that feeling of a family going down the road kind of thing.
And this was Francis's last film before he officially retired after this. So this was actually like his kind of his swan song. And despite the limitations of only working 10-hour days, they still finished this movie like 2 or 3 days ahead of schedule. Like they still finished it ahead of time, which is pretty remarkable.
Well, it turns out when you're like just standing around cornfields or cows or something, you're like, did we get everything? Yeah, I think we did. That's it for here.
Again, going back like through the movies that we've covered in this series and the movies that we covered in our previous David Lynch series, I think there's been a lot of discussion about, or a frequent discussion about, comedy and what David Lynch thinks is funny and, you know, what winds up on screen and the level of comedy that's presented. I gotta say, I was not expecting to laugh at a shot in the movie. Like there's no dialogue spoken, but there's a shot, and I figured this being the best place to talk about it since we're talking about the DP. It's Alvin has just started off on his journey and he's going down the road and the camera just slowly pans up to the clouds. And like typically that would be where the clouds would fade, you know, and the shot would dissolve to whatever the next scene is. But instead the camera just lingers on those clouds for just a moment and then comes back down to reveal that Alvin's not that much further down the road. And it's such a really great comedic beat that it actually had me laughing out loud. Yeah.
There are a lot of funny moments in this movie. That's not one that stood out to me as a funny moment. I found that more of like he's just, it's almost a wistful moment where he is just taking in life, you know, and allowing it to go at his pace. That's how that not melancholy, it's more wistful where he's just enjoying the ride kind of thing and you know, taking in the journey.
I felt like it was sort of subverting like what a cinema savvy crowd might think is coming next visually, of like,
sure,
camera goes up, we'll see the dissolve, we'll go to the next scene. Nope, we're going to pan down just to show he's not much further down the road. Like he's going at a snail's pace here, folks. Like really hammering that in. And it just hit me as funny of just like, oh, he completely turned this thing on its head. And
sure, I mean, I guess I can see that. It just didn't hit me that way because I felt like that was just his point of view, like him looking up at the clouds and just like taking it all in. And then when it pans back down, that's just him going on with his journey. You know, he's just taking, because he does it when he goes under the bridge and he looks up at the bridge going over him. And, you know, he's just kind of taking in his surroundings. You get a lot of moments of that where he's just like being. You know, now there are a lot of funny moments in this, especially at the beginning of the movie.
Oh, for sure.
Which I'm sure we'll get into. But all of his interactions with all the other old timers in Lawrence, Iowa, especially the grabber scene, just really cracked me up. It's very, very funny. But anyway, also returning to the fold here is Jack Fisk, Lynch's longtime friend, and by this point, a veteran production designer. Since Eraserhead, where he had famously appeared as the man in the planet, Fisk had built an extraordinary career designing films for directors like Terrence Malick and Brian De Palma. I think working with Malick in particular, because Malick likes to shoot these big vistas, I think that made him kind of uniquely suited to capture the still pastoral beauty of the American Midwest that we see here. The same, you know, those landscapes that kind of define the straight story. Like when you think about this movie, a lot of times what you think about are those landscapes. And I think working with Terrence Malick really made him the perfect choice for this as a production designer. Surprisingly, though, this was the first time that he and Lynch had ever worked together in an official capacity as a director and designer.
When I was reading stuff about Fisk, it seems as though at this time, I mean, really what he would have been known for or had received a lot of acclaim for was designing films that utilize vast landscapes. It makes him a natural fit for this one, like you mentioned. And also just seems like perfect timing again, right? Like they haven't worked together yet, but now he's built this whole reputation and shows up at exactly the time that Lynch could best utilize him.
Yeah, for the perfect movie that's like suited to his skills.
Yeah. I love that about it. I don't know how he does it. Lynch just seems to have this reality work out for him somehow. Yeah. I also did want to mention I saw that Fisk was who built that house at the end that Harry Dean Stanton lives in. So, so I thought that was cool.
Great design, great old shack in the woods. Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's been there for 100 years. Like, it's fantastic. The filming began in the Iowa cornfields and followed Alvin Straight's exact path eastward through the harvest months and across the Mississippi River into Wisconsin. The shoot unfolded chronologically, which is very unusual for any movie. But they did that so that the changing light and color of the landscape would mirror the passage of seasons in Alvin's journey, just like they had in real life. And by some miracle, the weather actually cooperated with them.
The idea that this movie is shot sequentially, I don't know. I read a few reasons for it, obviously, but one of them they said, I think, was Richard Farnsworth is going to be growing a beard. And and it was like Richard Farnsworth's beard's going to grow a beard, and so you can't film it out of order,
right?
And so I think it's how they described it. In some places you see Lynch talk about people take this as a joke, but he says, "quote it's his most experimental film." But I feel like in some ways for him that's true. It's you're used to him being more chaotic, non-linear, fantasy-like, and this is like a straightforward, simple, realistic movie.
Yeah.
And I also saw him in a few interviews. I'll talk about, you mentioned earlier something about, this is not a documentary about Alvin Straight, but Lynch does discuss how this is the most documentary film in the fact that the structure of the movie is very much a documentary.
His storytelling techniques. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
not necessarily like the facts, but the,
right. Yeah. Just the flow of the movie and the pauses and talking to people and just that kind of thing. So I think for him, he was experimenting a lot and just trying different things out. So I guess he could say it tongue in cheek, like he knows that people are going to laugh at that when he says it's his most experimental movie.
Right,
but oh, the other thing I was thinking of here was just we talked about the name changes. He changes other certain things in the movie too. Like I saw Alvin crossed the Mississippi at Marquette, but he changed it to the Lansing Bridge in the movie because he preferred the character of that structure.
It's a great bridge.
When he filmed it. Yeah. I also feel like he kept some of obviously the Midwest is beautiful and they make sure to get all of that in there. But I feel like there's certain ways he shoots things are very slow or weird, and there's strangeness to the way. I guess what I'm talking about is I kept seeing stuff over and over again where people are like, "Oh, it's totally unlike any other David Lynch film," and yeah, it is. But I feel like maybe it's just because of the series. I was watching this movie, and there were multiple times throughout the movie I was like, "This is a David Lynch movie."
Unmistakably so.
I can see it's a David Lynch movie.
Yeah.
And just even the neighbor, in the lawn chair.
That whole opening sequence with the neighbor in the lawn chair, the way that he's showing the house, the camera kind of snakes through the yard and shows the window. You hear a thump. That could have gone in a completely different direction and been a very Blue Velvet-esque story.
Yep. I was like, this is an alternate take of Blue Velvet.
Yeah. If you didn't know that it was leading into the Straight story, that could have led to that body thumping is somebody's been murdered or whatever. It could have gone into something else. But that whole opening sequence feels very much like Blue Velvet. It's showing the same sort of Americana that Blue Velvet did. He does that a lot in the movie, but I think the opening is the most obvious example of that. So the cast and crew of the Straight Story lived and worked among the residents of each small town that they passed through. Locals often stopped by the set to share stories of the day that they had seen Alvin ride past on his mower. And fittingly, Lynch, they had 3 different lawnmowers on set, and Lynch could often be found puttering around on set on one of them, just testing them out, chatting with the crew, having fun. You know, it's David Lynch. He likes to have fun on set. I think it was on Blue Velvet where he was just always on a bicycle, like a pink bicycle riding around set. You know, he just having a good time.
Like, I think David Lynch likes to immerse himself in the stuff going on his film anyway. So the idea of, like, you know, I can't remember if we've mentioned it already, but there was definitely the idea he wanted to have the movie have this floating feeling going on. And so I can picture that he wants to ride around on the slow moving farm equipment just to see, like, just to see how that feels or how it moves, or whatever. I saw stories about him, like, even like with some of the aerial landscape shots that he had to talk to the helicopter pilots, that it took some convincing, he would say, like, an extra instruction to get them to just slow down enough to get the look that he was going for, because he can see the bigger picture, I guess, so he knows what he's going for. It's just interesting stuff you don't think about, like that he was saying, like they're trying to get the aerial shots for him, but they're not thinking about exactly how it should feel when the aerial shots happen. And so apparently they were having to, like, slow down way more than they normally would. They were having trouble understanding him. He talked about, like, how important it was for him to get that feel right, because it was like I think the words he used were like delicate balance for the emotion, basically. I think what I was trying to get to is that it feels like the film could be, and it is in places, it could be just like glossy and just pretty, but going back to that slowness and everything, I just feel like there's something, like, Lynch is still trying to get like a specific vibe here, so we're not losing that when he's doing this tonight. And I feel like him riding farm equipment makes me feel like, oh yeah, this is him. How does the lawnmower move? I just wonder what's going on in his head when he's doing something like that.
Lynch's approach blurred the line between fiction and reality. He wasn't, like, simply recreating Alvin Straight's journey. He was retracing the whole thing, folding the real world into his film until the two became almost indistinguishable. So, like, the house that they use in the film, for instance, that's Alvin Straight's actual home. And the neighbors we see on screen were, in fact, his real neighbors, a choice that just kind of adds another layer of authenticity to the film's grounded reality. He wasn't just recreating small-town America, he went and found it. But not everything on set was idyllic. Richard Farnsworth's illness was kind of impossible to ignore at this point. His cancer has spread. Walking required 2 canes by this point. The paralysis of Alvin's legs isn't a performance. Like, that's part of Farnsworth's reality. He was having a hard time walking. He had a hard time walking when he dropped out earlier in the process, and it had gotten worse as the film went on, or as his illness grew. But even so, his quiet perseverance became the emotional center of the production. Crew members said, you know, they were like, every day he worked was a miracle. Like, they were so inspired by him and his willingness to do this, to tell this story despite the discomfort that he was in. But even among the physical strain of the shoot, there was a sense of calm on set. If you hear people talk about it, it's kind of what it feels like, a kind of unspoken reverence that seemed to echo Alvin's journey itself. And for me, one of the most memorable moments in the film, and one of the most memorable moments during the making of this, if you hear the stories told, came while filming the bar scene, this confessional conversation between Alvin and a fellow veteran. When they filmed that scene, Lynch kept the set completely quiet. He ran 2 cameras on the actors in tight close-up, and he just let the scene play out with no rehearsal. It was done in a single take, and they nailed it. I was absolutely floored by this scene when I watched this movie. It is a pretty incredibly powerful moment. I think that, like so much of the Straight story, this scene radiates empathy, especially for the kind of elderly people who are so often forgotten or dismissed by the world. It's like people get to a certain age and they just kind of get thrown away. But Lynch doesn't do that. Lynch is patient with them. He gives them time. He gives them space. And he just let these 2 old timers talk about it. And it's one of the few glimpses that we get into Alvin's haunted past. And it's kind of devastating. The restraint here is pretty remarkable in Lynch's filmmaking. He doesn't really rely on any flashy camera work. He just lets 2 great actors, Richard Farnsworth, and the other guy's name is Wiley Harker. He's just kind of a working man's character actor. I think the biggest thing he did was General Hospital or something. He was a recurring character in there. He's in Crime Wave. Sam Raimi, he's the mayor in Crime Wave. That's the only thing that I've ever seen him in. He doesn't have a long list of credits, but Lynch just kind of lets them be and lets them do their thing. And I think one of the most striking things about that scene is not in how it's filmed necessarily, but in the sound design and what we hear. Because beneath their conversation, You can make out the faint sounds of the battle from the war when they're talking, the noise of the trenches just kind of echoing through their memories. And it's subtle, but it's enough. It tells you everything about what Alvin's carrying.
Yeah.
Because like he's making a confession to this other guy who he's never told a single soul his entire life. And it's one of the many moments in the film where you get to see Alvin just interacting with these other people. And it's such a powerful depiction of a lifelong regret. That's part of why he's making this journey, because he feels like he's done things that he needs forgiveness for, even if he's only getting forgiveness from himself, and he has to get that out. So he meets this perfect stranger. He's sipping on some milk because he stopped drinking, and tells this story that is, and the way that Richard Farnsworth tells it, it's like absolutely heartbreaking. And the other guy too. I mean, the Wiley Harker is incredible. You hear the emotion in his voice when he's telling his own story about his friends getting killed when they were kids, and the guilt that they both feel just by surviving. Lynch makes it feel like the weight of an entire lifetime is just sitting in that room with them, and it is powerful filmmaking.
So much of this movie reminded me of my dad, who won't go into everything, but like Vietnam veteran. And something my dad told me was just like, some of this stuff doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And it's been hard because I've tried to get him to tell me some of the stories of some of the things he saw and experienced over the last, of my lifetime, trying to get him to tell me these things. And it's taken, I'm in my 40s now, and he's only told me maybe a handful of things. And he's just like, no, don't. Some of this stuff doesn't go away. And like watching this scene play out, God damn it, I told myself I wasn't going to cry during this episode, but it just really brought some of that stuff from my dad back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I took it as it was a real testament to also, I guess, the aging of this character too, and just realizing that there are certain aspects of your life, mistakes and other things that you can't do anything about anymore. Even when he's talking to the brothers, the Farley brothers, in that scene with the lawnmower repairman, that nobody knows you like your brother, and that sort of thing. And this is a story that likely he's never told his brother either, but something about him talking about it then, it's like it came across to me like he's laying this all out there and also realizing he's getting this off of his chest, and there's things you can't do anything about now, but he's still on this mission that there is something he can fix, a mistake he's made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If anybody at home is keeping score, I've counted at least 3 miracles throughout this production of like the weather and, being able to work with Farnsworth, and this one take scene that just like the shockwave of devastation of this scene is just incredible.
It really is. I mean,
yeah.
it's just an amazing piece of filmmaking and piece of acting from these guys. I mean, I have to imagine that, they filmed this one take. I'm sure they weren't like, we're going to do one take and be done. But Lynch saw this performance, was like, well, we can't do any better than that.
Yeah.
Like, were the cameras rolling? Was everything on? Was sound good? All right, let's not try to fuck it up and try to do that again. You can't get lightning in a bottle twice, because we just got lightning in a bottle.
Yeah. I think it's definitely a testament to the statement of like genius and simplicity. It from a technical standpoint, correct me if I'm wrong. And I mean, they're doing stuff with the sound.
Sure.
But other than that, it's a fairly, here's the drinking game. Go count how many times we say pretty straightforward.
Right.
It's a pretty straightforward scene of like these guys, they've lived these lives. We just turn the cameras on and just let this tragic beauty unfold in front of you for a moment, let it pour out of them. And God, yeah, genius and simplicity. This is it.
Well, that scene, like so much of the straight story, captures what Lynch called a floating feeling that he was trying to capture. A sense of calm, steady momentum that drifts rather than rushes. When he was talking about the making of this, he said that Alvin's 4-mile-an-hour journey was moving so slowly that you could see the texture of the road. And that idea guided his approach behind the camera as well. Just slow and steady wins the race.
I think that's interesting, that choice of words, especially considering this is after Lost Highway, where there's more than one shot of this
blurry road.
Traveling down the road
Just
at
pure
a
chaos.
breakneck speed.
Mhm.
Yeah, where it's just a blur. Yeah, this is the other side of that.
It is. And that same sense of stillness carried into the film's sound as well, especially in Angelo Badalamenti's score, which may be the most delicate music that he ever wrote for a David Lynch film.
Yeah, it's honestly kind of beautiful when you think about the history of those two together. Like they'd been collaborators since Blue Velvet, and it's a partnership that Lynch in interviews always calls like fate. But, you know, the guy who brings you all like the haunting synth driven anxiety in like Twin Peaks or something, now he's got to deliver a score for a movie being distributed by Walt Disney Pictures.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you why, in certain parts of that movie, I was like, this motherfucker was itching to use a fiddle somewhere.
He sure was. He was ready. Yeah, I mean, Badalamenti's collaborations with Lynch are usually defined by mood, like those dark, romantic, dreamlike swells that give Blue Velvet and Fire Walk with Me their emotional unease. But the straight story existed in a different world entirely. That approach wasn't going to work for this film. So here he traded eerie atmospherics for open pastoral themes, music that feels as wide and patient as the Midwest itself.
Exactly. And Badalamenti himself called this one, quote, so different from the kind of score he and Lynch had been doing previously. So he was conscious in that movement away from like the ominous synths and the dissonant orchestral stuff that you got in like Lost Highway. So he's delivering like country tinged stuff in these tracks that he's doing, like you got acoustic instruments like guitars and like I said, the fiddle would, if you listen to tracks on the soundtrack, I had marked down like the Lawrence, Iowa or Alvin's theme. The music, it's like really rustic and it like kind of mirrors the landscape that they're going through. And it's got an interesting way of being, parts of the time it sounds cheerful, but there's still like this melancholy about it.
Yeah.
So it's like a weird balance. I think I mentioned delicate balance earlier. It's like that same thing with like that, what you're seeing on screen, sound and music and everything. It like adds to that emotion of what this whole process is. It looks like Lynch, like also, and Badalamenti, they care about the music in the same way as they do what's on screen as far as what's happening in the particular sequence.
We know that Lynch puts a great deal of thought into all of the sound of this film, and that extends to the music. In that interview, there's an interview with a publication called The Believer, where Badalamenti's talking about his whole career, but they talk about Straight Story for a little while, and that's where he talks about it being so different from anything that they had done before. And in that interview, he says he sees it as part of an Americana tradition, music rooted not in mystery, but in compassion. He also talks in that interview about how he and Lynch often talked about Sissy Spacek's character, Rose, and how to express empathy for her own sadness and heartache without drifting into melodrama. And I think that sensitivity is at the forefront of Rose's theme, which is one of the most tender pieces that Badalamenti ever composed, I think.
Well, Lynch didn't even just worry about like the score. It's like he controlled, well, he's credited as the sound designer on the movie too.
Yeah.
So he like maintains, like he controls that whole thing. And I think maybe it was him that said, or somewhere I was reading, it was like he was trying to maintain a specific oral experience. He was saying in one interview, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I remember him talking about stimulating the ears as well as the eyes. This one it reminded me a little bit of Lost Highway, that they would have like Trent Reznor come in with like these weird sounds and stuff like that they would use. But in this case, some of the sounds that they're using and stuff is like the Heartland Life kind of stuff, you know, like there's like the whir of the grade elevator, like the lightning storms and the cyclists when they're going past in that one scene. Instead of like that industrial dread that they used in Lost Highway, now there's like this country Midwest texture of the sounds and stuff like that.
They're using similar tools just in a very different way to create a different effect. Yeah, it's really good work. And the score to this was released in 1999 by Windham Hill Records, which is a record label that's best known for its quiet, meditative catalog, which is kind of fitting for for this music. Title tracks like Alvin's Theme, Country Waltz, and Final Miles mirror the film's pace. They kind of unfold like gentle chapters in Alvin's journey.
Keep saying this over and over, but there was like a measured control about how all of this was working, which is interesting for, when you think about Lynch and how dreamy his stuff ends up turning out. Usually, as far as what he intends to get across, he has a specific view. But, with this being written by Mary Sweeney, I also saw that he kind of, like, she got some say, like, in the editing room and that sort of thing. Like, she's obviously deeply familiar with Lynch, but also she's the one who is in control of what goes on in the bedroom, so she gets it. I don't know that has anything to do with it, but come on.
Well, she is the editor of the movie. I mean, she is the credited editor of the movie.
And she noted in one interview, I remember, like, she called this the final rewrite of the script, like mashing up like exactly how they wanted the scenes to fit with the music and that sort of thing. She talked about too, like, how more people would have leaned more into more conventional talkative scenes, particularly at the ending of the movie, but they tried to keep the pacing of everything very spare, I think is the way she described it, because they were very worried that any of this could come across as sentimental or schlocky and that kind of thing. So they wanted it to feel dignified in the way that they were putting this movie together. And Lynch said that, like, when he was in there with her during the final cuts of the movie, like, he said that when they got to the parts and they were picking out the music, that all of the emotions he had felt reading it started coming back to him, and that he said he started getting a lump in his throat. And then he says, and I have to admit, like, quote, I cried like mad in the editing room with her. Oh. And it would be cool if he'd have got a hernia from that too, like he did that time.
He did from Badalamenti rapping.
Yeah, right.
Well, critics, when the movie finally came out, described the music in it, the score, as poignant and heartwarming. And it's easy to hear why. The melodies evolve alongside Alvin's trip, sparse guitar lines giving way to cello and viola before the orchestra swells, just enough to remind you what's at stake. If you watch the movie, you can actually you can actually literally hear the music getting bigger as it goes on. It starts off much more sparse and gets more traditional orchestral towards the end. It's a deceptively simple score, but it accomplishes something quietly profound. It moves along with Alvin straight, never ahead of him. Like Lynch's camera, the music refuses to hurry. It doesn't push the audience toward emotion. It just drifts you there patiently.
So I'm going to try this. Justin's usually good at the discussion points, but I was thinking about this, that, how, like, there's, like, patience with the way that the music goes with the movie, like, as it goes along, and like you said, like, floating or drifting or whatever. So if you want a conversational point, I was thinking about how in a lot of these films, like, it feels like Lynch often talks about there being like a spiritual element in his films, like if it's the afterlife or a perspective change or something like that. And then the post-production choices here, like the way that Badalamenti's music is and the focus on the sound design, and it seems like there's a focus on, like, natural stuff too, like the wind and the rain and that sort of thing. Does it feel like he's still looking for that same spiritual perspective change as he's going? Instead of, though, like, Black Lodge jazz music, he's trying to do it with, like, more natural stuff or Americana stuff?
Well, I don't think there's necessarily a change in, like some of his movies you could see as there being a literal change in the characters, like people literally moving on to other realms of existence. And obviously this is a much more grounded story than that. I think the music is more it's just more fitting of Alvin Straight's point of view on life. That's how I kind of see it. Now, whether that's a spiritual journey for him or not, there's no discussion of spirituality or religion or anything like that from Alvin Straight. Any kind of redemption that he's looking for in the movie doesn't seem to be like to go to heaven or whatever. That's never mentioned, which in a lot of movies like this, that's probably something you would see mentioned, where, like, somebody, they want to leave this world in good standing with whoever's up there, right? But for him, it's just about doing right really by his family and by himself. And I think that can be seen as a spiritual journey to a lot of people who might be spiritual but not religious. I think the music is very often angelic along his journey, but I don't know that the music is necessarily, like, conveying any kind of transformation like it does in some Lynch movies. But I don't think that's fitting for this. So I think David Lynch knows exactly, and Badalamenti know exactly what they're doing as far as how the music is intertwined with the story.
You know, if you go back through our episodes, I don't usually chime in on the music. Justin and Gary have much more knowledge and personal interest in music than I do. But in thinking about when I would mow our lawn here and have sort of music floating through my head, you know, the music I would listen to in my 20s is different than what I listened to in my 30s, different than what I listened to in my 40s. And I wonder if this is kind of in trying to accurately portray Alvin's life or mental state, if you will. I wonder if this revealed some stuff about himself, of just kind of like, yeah, this type of music is a particular type of calming, soothing, that rustic feel, you know, and I wonder if maybe not exactly the same thing, but I wonder if David Lynch saw some of himself in that. The music that you use to fill the quiet moments of your life, I wonder if he had any thoughts about that as his life was changing, as he was aging.
Side note, Kat would often find Todd 3 miles down the road and have to like drag him back on the lawnmower. Like, Todd,
listening to the dumbest shit.
Yeah, he's listening to fucking Seether or something down the road.
It was him. It was.
I wouldn't put it past me. I wouldn't.
I wouldn't either. That wasn't a random band pull that that felt very authentic to Todd.
I'm gonna tell you. As soon as you said it, I went, "Ooh, Seether!" Like in my head.
I will say something else you said there reminded me of something I saw that they only miss it in passing, and there's no. I haven't seen anywhere that this is actually the case, like it was meant to be this way. But speaking of the floating and the different reflections on your life as you go or whatever, it's interesting too that the people that he meets along the way starts off as like this young like mother to be. And then it's like there's a middle-aged lady or like adults athletic or maybe those brothers, but then it starts like creeping up. It's like they get older as you go. And yeah, then eventually the old man at the end that he's talking to at the bar and stuff like that. It's just, that's another thought there.
Yeah, that's interesting. Where did the bicyclists come in? Are they after the deer lady or before?
I think I was just trying to add another example, so I don't really remember.
I think that's before. I think that's before.
Is it before
because
the
I
deer
think
lady?
it's kind of in the beginning of his journey. I'm just kind of, I felt like that part was David Lynch kind of commenting on this man that even the modern world going rustic, like riding a bicycle, the modern world can't help but go by so quickly.
Yeah, that's part of it. But that scene, one thing I like about it is, and the way that it plays out, especially now, the 18-wheeler going by and knocking his hat off, that's really that. But these guys, they speed past him. And in a lot of movies, you would expect, like, these guys are going to be dicks to this old man. Like, they're just going to, like, you know, because they're young whippersnapper kids and they're assholes and they're going to be a dick to this guy. But then the next scene, you see him riding his lawnmower into their, like, encampment, and they start applauding him, and they love him. And then they have this great conversation with him. And the conversations are great because they also ask dumbass questions like kids would ask. But it leads to him, like, what's the worst part about being old? But then that leads to they're not trying to be dicks. They're just kids. You're being insensitive without meaning to be. They're actually being nice to this guy. They're just doing it in a dumbass way. But it leads to a very poignant moment. Like, well, the worst part about being old is remembering when you're young. Yeah. And they're like, what a fucking line that is. Yeah. What a line of dialogue that is. I was watching it with my fucking back hurting going, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, I feel that too. My damn hips, not what it used to be.
There's a reason I don't have any karate trophies in my office anymore.
Well, with the film complete, Lynch was ready to share this unexpected little miracle with the world. The Straight Story had its world premiere at the Cannes Film Festival in May of 1999, screening in competition for the Palme d'Or.
Cannes is famously dramatic, but I don't think any audience has ever been more confused, I bet.
Yeah.
Mary Sweeney said that the early buzz was strong and that it helped it land in competition for the Palme d'Or, but Lynch was reflecting on that it being in competition adds like this whole other dimension to presenting
a lot of pressure.
Yeah, he said a lot of suspense was another thing he mentioned. It's just weird, like such a lighthearted movie that it's turning into this other thing at the Cannes Film Festival.
Mm-hmm. Well, after its Cannes debut, something very surprising happened. Disney stepped in. Peter Schneider, who was then the president of Disney Motion Picture Group, saw the film at Cannes and later said, quote, "It's a beautiful movie about values, forgiveness, and healing. As soon as I saw it, I knew it was a Walt Disney film." And so, in maybe the strangest turn of David Lynch's career, which is saying something, The Straight Story was distributed in the United States by Walt Disney Pictures, complete with the bright blue castle logo at the beginning and a G rating from the MPAA. Can you believe that David Lynch, of all people, made a G-rated movie?
The most shocking thing.
Yeah, the most shocking thing he's ever done.
Shocking.
The man who brought you Dennis Hopper's Frank.
Right. A G-rated movie, general audiences. Lynch later said he actually took the call from the ratings board. Normally, that's something your producer would take. His producer was his girlfriend, Mary Sweeney. She was like out running errands or something, so he happened to be home when they called. They were calling for her, so he answers the phone, and they're like, "Congratulations, Mr. Lynch, you've made a G-rated movie." And his response was like, long pause, followed by, "You're going to have to say that again, because I'm never going to hear that again in my life."
Yeah, I love that. And then John Roach tells a story that the most fun time he had was at a screening he got to go to. And he said the biggest laugh of the whole movie was at the beginning of the movie.
When you see
that? Yeah, because he said the audience saw Walt Disney Productions presents a David Lynch film. And he said everybody started laughing. And because he was like, they literally thought it was a joke. That this auteur of sex, violence, and surrealism is making a G-rated movie for the mouse.
I remember Lynch mentioned that he overheard or somebody told him that they had overheard somebody standing in line to go see the movie when it was released and going, "Isn't it weird that there are two directors named David Lynch?" Like they didn't even think it was the same guy.
Right.
But the movie had a lot going for it. For a brief moment, you've got a major studio behind you. You had a pretty good debut at the Cannes Film Festival. So for a moment, it seemed as if The Straight Story might become Lynch's big mainstream commercial breakthrough. It even felt like an old-fashioned Disney picture, something they might have released in the 70s when family movies could still be sincere and unhurried. But this is 1999. The year of The Matrix, the year of Fight Club, The Phantom Menace. Audiences were chasing adrenaline, not meditations on aging and grace at 4 miles an hour. And so in the end, well,
5 to be fair,
he slowed down, and it's an average of 5
hills,
miles.
fellas. We're not accounting for the hills.
Yeah, he goes down that hill pretty fast at one point. He's probably going 12 to 13 miles an hour.
Holy shit!
Hold on, Alvin.
Oh, that scene gives me like anxiety. Like the way it's shot with the camera moving. Anyway. In the end, The Straight Story earned about $6.2 million worldwide. Another box office disappointment for Lynch. But critically, it was almost universally praised. Roger Ebert gave it 4 out of 4 stars. Remember, Ebert's never been the biggest David Lynch fan. He gave it 4 out of 4 stars, calling it a film of simple beauty and infinite warmth. Variety praised Lynch's simple but not simplistic portrait of the American heartland, and Empire called it an exercise in strange sweetness that wouldn't have shamed John Ford at his most elegiac.
I saw a story with I think it was Lynch telling you that Mira Sorvino was sitting in front of him at Cannes, and she immediately turned around and was bawling and just put her hand on her heart, was just like, what is going on? And Mary Sweeney, she brought up a point that I thought was maybe my favorite thing that could have happened from it. Is said that Richard Farnsworth and Freddie Francis were both there and got a standing ovation from everyone. And this would be she called it a quote. Her quote was a beautiful major chord, because this would be one of the last professional moments that either of these guys would have.
Yeah. Well, not everyone was charmed critically. New York Magazine dismissed the movie as Lynch playing tourist. They called him a visitor paying his respects. They thought the movie was good, but they're like, this is just Lynch playing in a different sandbox. Sort of wrote it off that way. Well, some critics at the time in 1999, when the film was released, maybe out of cynicism, read the film as Lynch trying to go straight to win back the mainstream after Lost Highway's commercial failure, And others saw it as the proof that he had finally grown up as a filmmaker, that he'd put away all that silly darkness and surrealism for good. But they were wrong. I mean, Lynch wasn't chasing respectability. He wasn't trying to make a family film or a Disney movie. He was doing what he had always done. He was following a story that moved him. It just happens that in this case, he found one that didn't scream, it whispered. And the world just wasn't sure what to make of that.
Weird that people would think you've grown up when you make a perfectly just standard film.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that, because the straight story might seem like an odd detour in David Lynch's career, but the more you sit with it, the more I think it feels like an essential work, because it's certainly easy to see why it's so often viewed as an oddity in Lynch's career. Its style and subject matter are really, at least on the surface, unlike anything else that he's ever done. And unlike some of his other box office disappointments that were later rediscovered and embraced, this one kind of lacks a lot of the qualities that make Lynch's work ripe for cult devotion. So it's never quite, I mean, people watch it now and love it. It's true. But it doesn't have that same kind of cult devotion that really every other David Lynch movie does. Even Dune, I think, has more of a cult following than this movie probably does.
I mean,
what do you
Dune
think
had
that is?
The guy wrote that big book about Dune.
Yeah,
you know?
Max Avery, who we had here on the show, wrote a 600-page tome about the making of Dune. Obviously, Dune and Straight Story's never gotten anything like that. It doesn't even have a Blu-ray release in the United States. I had to get a fucking Australian import to be able to. I mean, it's on Disney Plus now. Thankfully, it got added there a couple years ago, but. Like, to own a physical copy of it, I had to order it from another country to get that. Like, it just, people seem to overlook it here. So why do you think that is? Do you think it's because it's so normal and straightforward? Do you think people dismiss it because it doesn't have the quirks of Lynch's other work?
I just think that, yeah, it's easier to remember David Lynch for the more outlandish stuff. I think, I mean, as far as when you think of what someone's known for, this could be perceived as, I don't think this, but like a bland milquetoast entry in his filmography.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's probably been more written about David Lynch than any other filmmaker that we've covered on this show. I mean, books. I mean, you've got the book that's like the philosophy of David Lynch, and that's one of dozens of books that are about. Not like about the making of the movies, but just about people digging into the meaning of his movies. His films often, they invite interpretation and philosophizing and endless theorizing, but the straight story doesn't. I mean, it's a very straightforward story. It's the one film in Lynch's career that doesn't beg to be decoded. So maybe that's why it gets overlooked, because it's not prompting us to go like, oh, what does it mean? Like, it's pretty clear what it means, more so than like Lost Highway, which I feel like Lost Highway is a movie you have to sit with a couple of times before you really start to dig into what it means. This one, I mean, there are things below the surface, but you don't walk away from this movie having conversations with your friends about what do you think it means?
Right. Nobody's leaving the theater going, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I think, at least for me, when I was not having seen this and knowing that we were going to be talking about it and it was coming up, and I look up anything about it, like, what's this movie about? And we've kind of teased it here and there, but it was just like, oh, I wonder what the story is with this one, or what it's going to be, because is this just like a needed a paycheck movie or something? Like, this doesn't seem like a David Lynch movie. I wonder how many people have actually sat down and watched it.
Yeah, I wonder how many people dismiss it without even watching it, because they think it maybe is like David Lynch as a director for hire, which he's only done one time, and that was on Dune, and he said he would never do it again. So this was a passion project as much as any of his other films. But people, obviously, if they don't know the story behind it, they don't know that. So maybe they're like dismissing it. But also, in all of the books that I've read researching this series, all the books that I've been using throughout this series and our last David Lynch series, a lot of times this movie rarely gets more than a passing mention. Like, I mean, the Ian Nathan book had a chapter on it, but it's a shorter chapter than his other chapters. Maybe it's because it is easier to just explain what it is.
I don't know why, but I feel like I had never even heard of this movie before this.
Really?
So, yeah, I don't even think I ever knew it existed.
Hmm.
So, I mean, not that I am the end all be all of film, but I just mean like it's weird. I've heard of David Lynch. I know movies like Lost Highway and Mulholland Drive and
Yeah.
Eraserhead and all of that stuff, even The Elephant Man or
Yeah, but like
you
when
know,
he passed away last, or well, I guess earlier this year, all of those movies got mentioned in like obituaries and things like that. But this one didn't, not often, not as often as
yeah.
all of his other stuff.
Just feels like this thing that went under the radar. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously it didn't completely because we talked about it was at Cannes and
Yeah.
up for the Palme d'Or, and there's an Oscar.
But as far as like
nomination involved.
the general public though, like people
Yeah,
I wonder.
don't talk about it as much.
I mean, I think it's fair to say Lynch set a tone with his earlier career, and there's a lot that comes with that castle and blue logo
Mm-hmm.
that says Walt Disney.
Oh yeah.
And I think it is easy to dismiss that alone, but it's such a weird thing to think that a director as unique as Lynch, as crazy as things have gotten throughout his narratives, why something weird and shocking and cinema shocking as
Ayo.
yeah.
as doing something for the House of Mouse, like why is that more shocking, or why does that automatically make you dismiss a project?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't. I don't know.
And I don't think like when Disney was trying to sell it that they were selling it as like a David Lynch movie or anything.
Yeah.
Like the trailers weren't like a film by David Lynch, because that's a terrible marketing strategy.
Hey, Mom and Dad, remember Eraserhead?
Yeah.
Well, guess what's coming from Disney?
But even in the years since, where people now know that it's David Lynch, they're just like, they just don't watch it or don't care about it as much. And I think they're doing themselves a disservice, because I think, there's not a lot of theorizing and things like that you can do and decoding like you can do with his other movies, Twin Peaks and all that stuff. But there's plenty to talk about with this movie, because it's a really, I mean, we've been praising it this whole time, but it is a really wonderful movie and incredibly made. It's not that it's just like a sweet story, which it is, but it's like, it's a very well directed movie. And now I will admit, now if I had seen this back in college when I was first discovering David Lynch, my early 20s or whatever, I don't think I would have liked it. I think it would have felt too slow for me at the time. Or as some of the reviews that Gary read back in our Somebody Needs a Nap segment, if you're on Cinema Shock Plus, you heard that. A lot of them called it boring and called it slow. I might have thought the same thing when I was first discovering David Lynch and I knew him as the Eraserhead guy, right?
Right.
But watching it now at an age when mortality feels less abstract than it used to, it hits pretty hard. Now, I'm nowhere near Alvin's age. I'm in my early to, well, I guess almost mid 40s. I don't know what point you cross over from early to mid, but I'm there. But you know what? My parents are close to his age. They're a little younger than him, but they're close to his age. So it hits a little closer to home than if I had seen it in my 20s when my parents were like, well, I mean, the age I am now. And I think that's part of what makes this movie special, is that it's one of those films that meets you where you are in life. It can change with you. It's gonna feel different depending on at what age you watch it, I think. And the same is probably true for Lynch himself. I don't think the guy who made Eraserhead in the 70s could have made the straight story, at least not this version of the straight story.
Yeah.
I don't think he had it in him at the time. It made me wonder if the death of his friend Jack Nance, which was like just 2 years earlier, might have played into his connection to the material, like when he read the script, even if it was on a subconscious level, if that's part of why he connected with the script, because on some level, mortality had to be weighing on his mind, because his best friend of 20 plus years at that point had just unexpectedly passed away. So when stuff like that happens, you start thinking about this shit.
Yeah.
I think that it's impossible not to think about if you've faced that issue or been confronted with it. Or you mentioned your parents' age, but like Todd's lost people. I know I've lost people recently. My mom, the year before that, my brother. Don't think that stuff didn't enter my brain as I'm watching something
Right.
like this and what that means. Yeah, definitely. I think that had to, whether he knew it. David Lynch is pretty introspective and spends time meditating a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm positive he knew that was happening.
On some level, I think he had to. And, you know, it's a shame that people who are fans of David Lynch overlook this because, like you said earlier, Gary, it is unmistakably a David Lynch movie. Unmistakably. You cannot come out of this imagining it being created by anyone else. I mean, yes, it's different than his other stuff, but the rhythms, the pacing, even at times the tone, they're all very Lynchian. They're just stripped of his usual surrealism. But the feel of it still feels very much like a David Lynch. Like those early scenes in Alvin's hometown, especially his interactions with the other elderly guys, that grabber scene that still like just cracks me up. They feel like something out of Twin Peaks: The Golden Years or something, right? The way that the actors move remind me of Jack Nance's deliberate halting rhythm in Eraserhead, or in the bank manager's painfully slow walk in that Twin Peaks season 2 finale, which Lynch directed. Like the way that these guys move and talk and go about things, they feel like David Lynch characters.
Yeah. I was thinking the same thing. I was going to mention that earlier when you talked about, you know, just the people that don't think of it as a normal David Lynch movie. It's like, yeah, but the reoccurring or the characters that show up that are quirky and weird, and the comedy duo twin repairman, the distressed woman who keeps hitting deer, all of that stuff. The overall tone of this movie is much chiller, but there's also still darkness in the margins too. Like, I mean, that roadkill deer thing is an example of that. I mean, we saw like him be interested in, I feel like in like Wild at Heart, there were like roadside accidents. You know,
There was
like
the one with
that.
Sherilyn Fenn, which is obviously another road movie going through Lynch's version of America. And this is sort of a very, like you said, gentler version of that road movie.
Yeah, and I would say that the bizarre in the everyday part of what Lynch does, the absurdity of humans or existing in general, just the guys riding a lawnmower hundreds of miles is already inherently surreal and illogical.
You're right.
And so you don't need fantasy.
The thought I had is piggybacks right off of that. I think back on everything that I've seen and everything that you guys have tried to impart to me to help me get through or to help me endure some of the more nuanced entries in David Lynch's filmography. But one of the things that kind of stuck out to me was something that you said, Justin, of like sometimes things don't get explained, especially in life. Like there's times where you're just not going to get an explanation, such as life. This kind of falls right into that. Like
100%. Yeah.
It's a guy on a lawnmower. The end. Like, but I mean, from a plot standpoint, now from the story, yes, this is a man who has endured great hardship and he is seeking forgiveness. He's seeking reconnection, but he's also, this is a triumph of human determination of like, I'm going, I don't care what you say. I don't care my physical ailments. I'm going. If it takes me 6 weeks, if it takes me 6 years, I'm going. So I feel like those sentiments and those themes that don't require explanation, of which you're not going to get one, is very Lynchian and very
I mean,
goes right in the path with everything else.
And he's doing things his own way, which makes it feel very autobiographical for David Lynch.
Yeah.
So I was going to get to this too, is like one of my biggest obsessions with this whole thing was, what were his obsessions? I was thinking about like, why did David Lynch read this script and all of a sudden he had to do it? And you know, when he latches on, or he's waiting for that fish and it feels like one fell in his lap or something. And so I was like writing down notes about what was Lynch obsessed with in this story. And I wrote right below it, the art of doing something the hardest way possible. And I was like, that was one of my first thoughts with him. But thinking about this movie, I was like, okay, look, Lynch I mentioned this earlier, but he didn't have to make this weird. The story showed up weird.
Yeah.
It's an old man driving a lawnmower 240 miles at 5 miles per hour. It's already dream logic.
Yeah.
That's the hook. It's illogical, the whole thing. No red curtains or dancing in radiators or anything needed. It's a surreal premise in general. It doesn't need any extra decoration for that part. And the situation itself, like, yeah, it's already Lynchian. It's like a little folk tale that's like a little riddle. Like, why did the 73 or 83-year-old, whatever he was, cross 2 states on a mower? Because that was the only way he could. It seems like Lynch, it's like catnip for David Lynch. Like, that just seems like something he'd be interested in. There's the idea of what we kind of just touched on, like willpower. Lynch looks at Alvin like James Dean. He said that in interviews. Like, he's like his own James Dean without the leather jacket.
Yeah, he's a rebel doing things his own way.
Yeah, and so he can't do a ride from a neighbor or a bus or an Uber tractor or whatever. He's allergic to help. And the stubbornness is the engine of this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, he's got to do it his way, because this is almost an act of penance for him, it feels like.
I was just about to say the same thing. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
That's
but
fine.
Yeah. That forgiveness isn't free. Like, it's got to cost you something. It's sweat or it's time or it's pride. He even talks about, he's like, this cost me a lot of time, and I had to give up some of my pride on the way.
Had to swallow my pride. Yeah. I mean, even when he's offered a ride for the last bit by the guy who he stays with them for a few days in their barn, he offers him a ride and he rejects it because he's like, I've got to finish this the way I started it. I've got to do it this way.
Well, and to piggyback on that, I was reading that interview with William Straight, his son, who says the actual story of this is that Alvin, he had bad eyesight. He did have these ailments, but he felt like he couldn't see very well. He elected not to renew his license. It wasn't like something had failed or he was denied it. He just chose not to bother with it anymore.
Yeah.
And then there were options for Alvin, potentially, like at a certain town, a bus, or, if you really wanted to get somebody to help you with a plane or something, but he was just determined. He was doing it this way, and this was how it was going to happen. It was the only way that he could do it. And he was, in that philosophy of David Lynch book, they basically call it the false dilemma, is something like that. And so, like, he's created his own dilemma for himself. Even if it doesn't have to exist, he's decided that this is the only way for him to do what we just talked about, to pay penance for what he wants to accomplish and the goal that he's seeking.
Right.
So, yeah, that's just interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's something he felt like he had to do. Like, he's not punishing himself necessarily, but that long ride is forcing him to think back on things, that like whatever the rift is between him and his brother, he's got nothing else to think about on that trip other than that, and the rest of the things that the dark things in his past. So it's almost like if I got on a bus, I'd be in these conversations with a bunch of people, and I wouldn't have the opportunity to reflect on the things that I need to reflect on. That's what it feels like.
It's like when you get in trouble and a parent or teacher to
sit and think about what you've done.
And think about what you did.
Yeah. There's so much below the surface of what is seemingly a very simple story.
Think about who David Lynch is as a person too, just as far as we know that he's, I've said it a number of times, introspective or thoughtful person, or mindfulness is huge for him, and the meditation and just the slowness of it's like a discipline for him. So like this mower is setting like a tempo in this movie, just 5 miles an hour. And it's like he leans into that, and then well, Todd mentioned it as a guy, but like we look away, look back, and he's barely moved or whatever. That's like a mission statement almost in this movie, and
but he still has moved. It's just,
Yeah, yeah, you barely moved, but you have moved, and
But you
it's
have
just
moved.
about patience and you're calculating in the momentum that you have or something. And for a lot of people, a thing that's hard to understand, and I am not an expert at this, but if you read psychology books or philosophy, or a lot of times a lot of people say, like limitations or discipline are like part of getting better or making better things happen for your life. Like if things aren't hard, you don't actually get stronger. Just like if you're pumping weights in a gym, basically. Like it's supposed to be hard. It's supposed to hurt a little bit. Like that's how you're really making a change for the better. It's almost monk-like seeing the guy on the lawnmower,
Yeah.
just driving. And just to take it further, and I promise I'll shut the fuck up. I also think like the Psych 101 version of this is like Alvin is choosing a tool that matches his inner state. It's a fragile body, but a strong will. It's the lawnmower is also him, and it's working towards it. And he feels if he earns every mile that he gets on that, he'll deserve the forgiveness that he might get at the end of that journey. And so Alvin's picking it because of pride, because of the limitations, maybe, or just principle. But like Lynch, I think, is picking Alvin because it's like a straight line for him, like how he feels about what he's doing as a filmmaker and as an artist, basically.
And then at the end, he gets to the brother, and it's this notion of like talk is cheap.
Yeah.
Alvin doesn't say anything, doesn't say much except confirm that he came there by lawnmower, and his brother sees that and sees what his brother was able to
He knows what
do.
he's had to endure to get there.
So again, talk is cheap. He could ask him for forgiveness, but he's like, I did this to come see you.
That's the brilliantness of Harry Dean Stanton's part in that movie, or that whole scene. That just he looks out. I mean, like his basically like one of his only lines in the fucking movie is him like looking out, seeing the lawnmower and staring at it for a second. And like Justin mentioned early on, the wetness in his eyes when he's like looking at that. And it says essentially, did you take that all the way to come see me? And he says, yeah, I did. And that's
it.
That's it.
That's it.
That's the part you needed.
Yeah, exactly. And we're talking about Harry Dean Stanton, but I think we have not talked quite enough about Farnsworth, because man, like earlier I mentioned how much Harry Dean Stanton can convey with just his eyes. The same is true with Farnsworth as well. I mean, Farnsworth his performance as Alvin Straight is remarkable. Freddie Francis, in an interview I read with him, said that the one thing that he always made sure of was that the audience could see Farnsworth's eyes, those piercing, watery blue eyes of his, surrounded by this face that's full of the history of his life, all these cracks and wrinkles that show everything that he's been through. But there's something about Richard Farnsworth's eyes, the way that he they always have a little bit of a twinkle in them. Always a little bit of a wistfulness in them. There's something about the way that he kind of like will look off to the side, like the scene where he's overhearing Rose on the phone, finding out that Lyle has had a stroke. You can see all the inner workings going on in his mind as he listens, and that is remarkable acting to be able to convey what's going on in somebody's mind just by the look on their face is incredible acting.
Yeah. Justin, that I almost forgot to even mention that. And that was one of my favorite parts that I had even noted down. Because when I was watching it, I literally, I was thinking, I just saw that guy hearing what this is about, knowing it's about his brother,
realizing,
maybe bracing that he's dead.
Yeah.
And then, just like preparing for the worst, like it just, you could see all of that just in his face.
It's incredible. And like he'll look off to the side a lot of times as he's sitting there. We know he's thinking about his past, but he's remembering a life that we'll never fully know. We're never really privy to. Like we get fragments of his past through the stories that he tells along the road. But the real story, the emotional history lives in those eyes. Like when he admits to being a bad man once, to being a mean drunk, I think is what he calls himself.
Yeah.
We don't need to know all the details. His eyes tell us everything we need to know.
Yeah.
And as much as Lynch is known for the darkness of his movies, that's something you'll always see mentioned. I've always said that he's a director who is capable of deep empathy. Like you see it very clearly in The Elephant Man. You see it a lot in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. That was a big part of our discussion on that movie. And you feel it really profoundly here. Like, because The Straight Story might be the purest expression of that empathy. It's literally a film about decency and forgiveness and the small kindnesses that make life bearable. Literally the kindness of strangers. And it's not to say that this movie is without its darkness. You mentioned this earlier, Gary. Like, there is a dark undertone to this. We hear about Alvin's horrific experiences during the war. We see his run-in with the woman who keeps hitting deer on the highway, which is, in a way, funny, but it's also, there's an underlying darkness there. That's always been kind of Lynch's balance, though. Like, there can't be light without that darkness. But there is always light. That's Laura meeting the angels at the end of Fire Walk with Me. That's that. It's an incredibly dark movie, but there's that light at the end. And that's something you get with most of David Lynch's movies. Like, Alvin's life is full of grief. He's lost his wife. He lost several of his children. His daughter Rose, who lives with him, carries her own heartbreak. But what's remarkable is that Alvin doesn't wallow in a past that he can't change. He just keeps moving forward 1 mile at a time with compassion for every person that he meets along the road. And so I think in the end, The Straight Story stands as really proof that no matter the pace, you can always move forward to something better, to something brighter.
We've talked about his empathy a ton, and that's the way that David Lynch makes you feel empathy for these characters and everything, and that's true here as much as anywhere. But he just to go back to Richard Farnsworth for a second. I mean, you made a good point to point out his eyes. I was trying to pin down exactly what it was about him that gets you there, but it's like, it's hard to picture him as a stuntman, a former stuntman, because I always think of stuntmen as like
big,
tough
burly,
guys.
like, yeah.
Yeah. And the thing about him is he's so, just seems like a good guy. And it's hard to imagine that because the thing, if you think about his role in even Misery, which is admittedly probably the only thing I know him from, that when I saw him, I was like, I know him from somewhere. Where was it? And then I looked it up and I was like, oh, it's Misery. Yeah, he's the sheriff guy. And the thing is, in that role as well, it's not as though he has a ton of lines or a ton of scenes, but spoiler for Misery, but when he dies, like, you feel for him.
You're sad. Yeah.
You're sad. You're like, oh God, he was such a great guy. Like,
and you think that he's going to come in and save the day, and like, you know.
Yeah, you just like, you connect with him in Misery as well. Like, you're just like, I love this guy. Oh, what happened? In
a very short amount of time, you learn to sympathize with him.
God, this movie's so good.
It really is. It really is. I immediately like watched it and I was like, this just became like not only one of my favorite David Lynch movies, but I would call this one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, it's a phenomenal movie that I will revisit often, I think.
It's one of the movies that I think maybe someday we'll be better about doing stuff like this, but if I were having to make a list of the movies that we've done that, like, obviously Jim Henson could fit in this list a bunch, but like, just movies I need to watch when I feel like the world's caving in or like that everything is failing. Like, you know, I would put like I think we did like, I think I had turned around on Speed Racer for the Wachowskis, like in this, you know, in this same aspect, not for like the same aspect as this exactly, but I mean, just in the wholesomeness and goodness of something that exists. Like, this would definitely be in that list, basically, like just the same list we pack a bunch of the Jim Henson series in.
It reminds you that there's goodness in the world.
Yeah.
You know, Mr. Frodo.
it's not what you would expect in the David Lynch series.
No, it's
after
not.
You watched Blue Velvet.
But I mean, like I said before, even like Fire Walk with Me has that reminder. It's a little harder. It's not as obvious as it is here. This is clearly the most obvious. But that's what Elephant Man was about. This guy who had a horrific life, who people were nice to. Like there were people who were shitty to him. Absolutely. And his life was tragic, but in the end, he found kindness. And there was proof that people could be kind to him regardless of who he was. That's empathy. That's what this movie is as well. That's what Fire Walk with Me is. I mean, as a full exercise, it's an exercise in empathy for someone who's going through a horrific thing in their life. And I think that's something that doesn't get discussed enough with David Lynch's work, is how empathetic he is as both a person and a filmmaker. And this is the clearest example of that.
Do you think you have the opinion of Straight Story without seeing the rest of David Lynch's filmography?
I think it still comes across as an incredibly beautiful story and empathetic story. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think it's that I think it's just that clear, honestly.
It's undeniable.
Yeah.
I was trying to think of a more hopeful ending that David Lynch has given us, either I mean, the Elephant Man, John Merrick kills himself,
He gets to see his mom again at the end.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, floating
sure.
floating in the stars.
And so that also connects to this pretty well. But I will say, like, at least in that one, you get Laura Palmer with the angels or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But she's got to get fucking murdered horribly first.
Yeah. Same with the Robins at the end of Blue Velvet. It is hopeful, but there's still an underlying, like,
this one is these two guys sit on the front porch, and there's an instant understanding of the resolution, you feel like, and it's just hopeful, he got there and it worked.
And David Lynch has talked about, like, I think this was in Lynch on Lynch, where when he was a boy, one thing that inspired that scene or that helped him connect with that scene was when he was a boy, he remembers going to visit his grandfather at his house on his bicycle. He had to borrow a bike from a friend. So he went back to his house, saw his grandfather, and they sat and talked on the porch. Or they just sat together on the porch, really. They didn't even really talk because it's your grandfather. They had this unspoken connection. And he ended up being the last person to see his grandfather alive. That was the last moment they spent together, because he rode away to be with his friends on his bike. And a few minutes later, he heard ambulances. And his grandfather had passed away. And he talks about how there was just that moment where between them, they didn't have to say anything. They just sat together and were content being together. And that inspired that last scene, like that connection, that unspoken connection between people who were that close.
You just mentioning the fucking Elephant Man just made me, like, if I were good at writing things, or if I was good at talking too, I would find a better way to say all of this. That it's interesting to me that you mentioned Elephant Man and the way that happens. He sees his mother again, and the fucking fairy godmother appearing to Nicolas Cage or whatever, or was it the Good Witch? I'm sorry.
The Good Witch, yeah.
Yeah.
Glenda.
And Laura Palmer with the angels. This is the first one that it's legit, like they're happy and they just look up. And I'm like, all of these movies are trying to relive the promise of Eraserhead that in heaven everything is fine. Mm-hmm. Like the fucking radiator chick is talking about that. I just there's more to that somewhere. I don't know what it is.
Somebody write that thesis for us.
Somebody that's better at things do that.
There's something there. At the time of its release, audiences may have largely overlooked The Straight Story, but the industry did not. At the end of 1999, the New York Film Critics Circle named Richard Farnsworth Best Actor, and he also received an Academy Award nomination for his performance for Best Actor, making him, at the time, the second oldest nominee in history.
He lost that to Kevin Spacey for American Beauty, and I bet they want that one back.
Yeah. Can we have a mulligan on that one?
And this goes back to something we were talking about before the discussion. It just made me think like this film has a fucking Academy Award nomination. It's a relative, like it's an unknown gem, like kind of movie. And I know that Lynch, when he talks about like box office success, like he usually dismisses that kind of talk. And I think he literally has said like business is far down the ladder of importance. So he doesn't even like really talking about it, I don't think. This one, I feel like I remember seeing an interview with him where he talks about like, it's kind of sad that it's also ass backwards or something like that, you know? And in that same interview, he was talking about that, like, he does a job that he feels like he knows it's right. And then he said, when it's time to release them, that's when the heartache begins. And so, so it's I don't know. It's just sad that even with Disney's machine behind it and a G rating, it couldn't be a more successful movie or whatever.
Yeah. I'm glad people are starting to discover it now, especially now that it's on Disney Plus and easier to access. But it's still one that I feel like really flies under the radar.
And for Richard Farnsworth, by the way,
Yeah.
just because that's who you were talking about. It's sad. But at least he got the standing ovation at Cannes, I guess.
He did. But while the world was celebrating his performance, Farnsworth's body was failing him. That cancer that had followed him through production left him in constant pain, and eventually he was completely unable to walk. On the night of October 6, 2000, it's just a year after the film was released, a little over a year, Farnsworth took his own life at his ranch in Lincoln, New Mexico. The straight story ended up being his final film, his final performance. And it's a tragic ending, an unbearably human one for a man whose final role had been about endurance and grace. And like Alvin Straight, Richard Farnsworth lived and died on his own terms. And as for David Lynch, he would not be telling straightforward stories for very long. Don't get used to it, Todd.
Oh boy.
So some critics saw the straight story as a sign that Lynch had abandoned the weirdness and danger of his earlier work, trading it in for something more quote unquote respectable, more commercial. Those critics might have thought differently if they'd known what was coming next. Because around the same time that the straight story was debuting in Cannes, Lynch was quietly pitching a new television project to ABC. Now the network ultimately passed on it. But 2 years later, the footage that he'd shot for that pilot would resurface, reborn as a feature film. And that film would be the most critically acclaimed of his entire career. That film, the one that would drag him and us back into the dream, was Mulholland Drive. So that's it. That's what we're talking about next week. That was the story of the straight story. The straight story was the calm between the David Lynch storms.
For what it's worth, my wife said we finished the straight story and she says, I really like that one. David Lynch has earned a point for me.
Nice. Good.
And then she said, what's next? And I said, Mulholland Drive. And she says, I take it back.
She's already seen it.
Yeah, she's seen Mulholland Drive. She was so excited to watch it. And then I don't think it ever registers to her. Like at that time, like she wasn't used to David Lynch. It was before we started this series. Like now she knows who David Lynch is.
What to expect.
Yeah.
It's my spoiler alert, but I think I've said this on the show already, but it's my favorite David Lynch movie. Always has been, probably always will be. I think my ranking has changed a little bit as we've gone through all of the films in order, but I think Mulholland Drive is still at the top of the list for me. It's an incredible feat. It was critically acclaimed. It is, we'll talk about it next week, but it is widely regarded as one of the greatest films, really of all time.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but just as a preview for our listeners, Mulholland Drive contains one of, I think, what a lot of people widely consider one of the scariest scenes in film history. That like always makes it into like those lists when you see them talked about or YouTube videos or anything. It's like, this is the most frightening thing that's ever happened
in a movie that's not really a horror film.
No.
You know?
And it would make you think it's a horror film because it always ends up in those lists, like for that scene. But like there is a scene in it that is scary, and then
unnerving.
Also, I don't know if you guys saw this. I meant to show it to you before, but The Ringer just did a list like a month ago of the 101 greatest performances of the 21st century. And number one is Naomi Watts in Mulholland Drive.
All right.
Wow.
Hey, I'm not going to argue that. Mulholland Drive's ended up on a lot of lists, a lot of similar lists, including a really big one that just came out recently that we will talk about when we do that episode. So I don't want to give it all away because we want you guys to come back next week for that one. And again, huge thanks to all of our Cinema Shock Plus members for supporting the show and helping us make episodes like this one possible. As a reminder, our Cinema Shock Plus members get early extended episodes. If you're listening to this, you could have already heard the whole story a week ago. You also get access to our private Discord, merch discounts, Fire Shock with Me, which is our full Twin Peaks season 1 and 2 watch-along series, all kinds of fun stuff going on over there. So if you'd like to join them, head over to cinemashock.net/plus. I think that's it for this one, fellas.
I feel better about life. I'm ready to knock that down a peg next time.
Well, let our listeners know where you guys can be found on the internet.
I am at This is Gary Horde.
I am at Mr. Todd A. Davis.
You can find me at Justin_Bishop or the podcast at Cinema_Shock on most of the things, or head to cinemashock.net for links to all of our stuff. And until next time,
may the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
And be excellent to each other.
No, you can't help me. No one can help me. I've tried driving with my lights on. I tried sounding my horn. I screamed out the window. I rolled down the window and bang on the side of the door and play Public Enemy really loud. I have prayed to St. Francis of Assisi, St. Christopher too. What the heck? I've tried everything a person can do, and still every week I plow into Johnny. I have hit Johnny 13 times in 7 weeks driving down this road, mister, and I have to drive down this road every day, 40 miles back and forth to work. I have to drive to work, and I have to drive home. Where do they come from? He's dead, and I love Johnny.
Nothing about that said he has keys, though.
Nothing, no mention of the keys.
Yeah, go fuck yourself.
Well, speaking of which, plowing into Johnny sounds like you've been fucking Johnny. So
Yeah, it sure does.
I'll tell you something else dumb is I was flipping through stuff and saw Night of the Living Dead the other day pop up, and my first thought when I see it is Johnny has the keys. So
I know, same.
You'll
Yeah.
never forget it.
you've ruined that movie.
Yeah, thanks Todd.